Can you remember being a teenager? Can you remember the endeavors that you went to in order to be labeled as popular? Or were you on the other side of the spectrum? Were you bullied for the way that you looked? Did you have buck teeth? Did you get made fun of because you wore glasses? Did you struggle on where to fit in? As human behavior expert, Dr. Patrick Wanis says, teens naturally struggle with identity, and this struggle is made even more difficult by airbrushed magazines creating unattainable images. We'll focus on today the teen magazines and the unethical and immoral messages they send to our teenagers. This is to educate society, parents, and teens that magazines marketed to teenagers send messages that they may not be aware of, and we need to take responsibility. Teen magazines are large contributors to the negative body images that teens have about themselves and others. This media source speaks on topics that encourage teens to engage in unhealthy habits, whether it's physical or mental. I researched this topic through multiple sources and have spent hours investigating where the body image dilemma is beginning, as well as the additional negative storylines that are being presented to our teens. This is important to discuss this message because it affects our next generation. These teenagers are your children, your nieces, your nephews, your neighbor, and this information is introduced to them at this time in their life, and it will impact the remainder of their life. And we have a responsibility to educate ourselves and demand it to end. So we'll cover a few topics in this discussion. The first area that we'll look at is the teens' perceptions and how they're molded by the storylines that teens are saturated with in these magazines. The second area that we'll focus on is the actual article titles within teen magazines that shape a teen's perception on themselves and their peers negatively. Next, we'll discuss the digital altering of photos within these teen magazines and the causes this has on them, especially when it comes to self-hate and how it's fueled teen suicides. Lastly, we will discuss the responsibility we have to the teenagers to address and request that these unethical, immoral storylines be removed from magazines marketed to teenagers. So, can you remember the last time you went to the grocery store and you stood in line at checkout? Were you distracted by the hot pink, orange, and lime green magazine covers? How often have you picked those magazines up, flipped through them, or even placed them on the conveyor belt to be purchased? I'd like to open your eyes up to some mind-blowing numbers. Teens are exposed to more than 25,000 ads annually. Companies spend $17 billion a year marketing to this age bracket. The media, body, image, and eating disorders company says at least 60% of Caucasian middle schoolers regularly read at least one fashion magazine. These numbers prove that media does contribute to a teen's way of thinking. With such a large number of teens being exposed to magazines on a regular basis, let's take a glimpse at the articles that are published in these magazines marketed to teens. On the cover of Allure magazine in 2009, one of the main topics on the front page was 28 hottest tricks to sizzle in bed. Remember, this is a magazine that is advertised to teen girls. In a December and January edition of Teen Vogue, a feature topic was drinking diaries. Again, why are we allowing our teens to be exposed to magazines that are making profits off of humiliating stories told by teens who made decisions to partake in things that they're not even old enough or it's illegal to even partake in or to be involved in? In a 17 magazine, A featured topic was have your hottest abs, butts, and legs, giving a definition to our teens and even an image of what a hot ab, butt, and thighs look like. So what are we allowing to be communicated to our teens? We must understand that these stories are being told and they're more detrimental than we acknowledge. We have teens shaping their opinions on life around articles they read in a biased for-profit avenue. Teens are committing suicide because of their inability to fit up to par with photoshopped images of celebrities who magazines plaster all over the covers in order for teens to buy them. A study through Glasgow University revealed that suicide rates have nearly doubled in the past 20 years. And leading academics and children campaigners believe these actions to conform to female perfection as seen in celebrities within these teen magazines fuel this rise in teenage suicide. Images placed in these magazines ethically breach an individual's body image, cropping, lightening or darkening skin tones, editing the shape of one's face or chin, and the list goes on. These magazines are depicting an image of how a teen's body should look and what they should do in order to get this look, only to leave them falling short due to deception. With our teens being negatively influenced and given a message that is completely unrealistic, we need to be the voice and stand up against these magazines, voicing and demanding change as we see the ideals that teens see on TV and within teen magazines are all nothing more than a method to formulate self-hate. We need to be more aware of these messages and act against them. And a means of acting and speaking against the unethical and immoral messages sent to teens through magazines marketed to them, 14-year-old Julia Bloom started a petition and received over 80,000 signatures, demanding 17 magazine to include at least one image within their magazine to be unedited and unphotoshopped per issue. Eventually, 17 agreed after receiving the 80,000 signatures that Julia had gathered. These are steps that we need to be involved in. This is our next generation. We need to be aware of the messages and the way teens identify with themselves and those around them. I agree that teen magazines send unethical and immoral messages to our teenagers. Teenage years can be some of life's most complicated years. And in an effort to speak against these self-hate storylines and other unethical, immoral messages, let's encourage the editors of these magazines to focus on storylines such as civic involvement, scholarships, how to obtain a better GPA, how to save for college, what is modesty, being respectful to yourself. In a world of tearing oneself or others down, let's not allow our teens or teens that we are around buy into these storylines. Teenage years can bring enough of these problems on their own. So again, we must take action and be aware of these messages that are being expressed to our teens through magazines marketed to them. There are far too many pressures on teenagers to have a source who contributes to the problem rather than encouraging a positive perception on one's body, one's future. It's devastating. We must take action and demand that these magazines begin to come alongside of us and alongside of our teenagers with motivation and assistance towards positive influence to get through the struggles we already face as teenagers. I'm encouraging you to refrain from the purchase of these magazines for your teens and to take a step to educate those who may purchase them for their teens. We must be mindful of the messages that children are receiving in order to protect them from harming themselves, or mentally or physically, due to the messages they are receiving through these sources. Let's be mindful. Teenagers' perceptions are formulated by the storylines that are well saturated in these magazines. Remember, marketing firms spend over $17 billion attracting our teenagers. Also, let's remember that titles within these magazines shape the perception of one's self and others negatively. The age of photoshopping and cropping has produced body images that are unobtainable to continue to be contributed to the increase of teenage suicides. Lastly, we have a responsibility to speak against and refrain from the purchase of teen magazines who continue to release articles with unethical, immoral storylines to our teenagers. I encourage you to become more involved in developing a teen's positive view of themselves and others, beginning with eliminating your teen's exposure to these magazines. Thank you.